If you would pull out your policies and procedures, and we'll go through it. The first one is our policy on incentives, gifts, awards, and letters for students. And it says that all snacks, gifts are to be given only when authorized by the executive director. Volunteers should never give out food, drinks, candy, prize, homework, or handouts that has not been approved. All handouts should be provided by CLCA. I have a couple of additional things. I'm going to augment these a little bit as we go through. If you decide you're going to do snacks, it has to be approved. The snacks cannot be homemade. I know you're all great cooks. I know you produce wonderful things, but it has to be a store-bought item, and that's just for our own protection. If you make a homemade item and a child should get sick, even though it may not be related to anything you do, it creates a liability for our ministry. So it has to be a store-bought item. When you distribute snacks, it shouldn't be for one class. Every class should participate. If you're going to have snacks for everybody. And the snacks must be consumed at RT. They cannot take the snacks back to school. That just creates a distraction for the school that we don't want to create. Any questions about that? If not, we'll move on. If you're going to send home a letter, the person that should be sending home the letters is the lead teacher. Okay? And they should, when she sends it, it should be approved by her coordinator. And we encourage sending home letters. We encourage phone calls with the parents. The more we can let them know, the better it is. But we need to make sure that these are approved. If the coordinator has a question about whether that letter should be approved, then he will go to Laura as the executive director. Turn the page. Policy on communion. It is the policy of CLCA that this practice we must leave to the students' church and their pastor. So we do not serve communion. You've heard Gussie say about proselytizing. We're here to teach the children the Bible. But our agreement with the Board of Education is that we will not proselytize. That means you can't give them an invitation. You can't and tell them, I want you to come up here and confess your belief in Jesus. I'd love for us to do that, but we cannot, okay? If the student comes to you and says, I'm concerned, I want to have Jesus in my life, oh, you're free to go, okay? Please help them and bring them up. We also encourage you at that point in time, if they're not associated with a church, please try to help them get associated with a church. We don't want them just to confess Jesus and then have to go off on their own. They need that relationship, and they need that church and their church family to help them build that relationship as they go on. So please do that. So if the student asks for help, the real thing there that you need to remember is no open invitations. It has to be student initiated. Policy on personnel assignment, just briefly there. Just the note that the host church cannot be in charge of the program. Okay, that pastor, if there, we'd love to have our pastor serve with us, but they have to serve at a different location than their own church. And we do that so that this is non-denominational, and so it's not a given church related. Turn the page again. This is a very important one, the policy on non-entanglement. We have to maintain, the reason RT exists is so that we can teach Bible, but not entangle church and state. So we have to be very careful that we're not using any public resources. We meet in a non-public building. You can't go into the school and run a copy. You can't go into the school and ask for a pencil. I mean, it's that silly, but that's where we are. everything has to be independent. We don't entangle the school in any way if we can help it. We can't ask the teachers to announce certain things for us. We do ask the teachers to let students put things in their book bag when they get back, and if you read through that policy, and I hope you all will, read through this policy in detail, but we cannot have them do our work for us, because that comes back to entangling church and state again as we go through. If a public school employee that came up just recently one of the teachers wanted to attend the end of the year program because her child was in the program. Our rule there is we love to have them. They have to sign out. They cannot be on the payroll at the time they attend. So if it comes up, coordinators and others, that they want to attend, once they sign out, they're a free citizen. They can do what they want, okay? So they can attend the program. Release time volunteers, if you look down number 7, must not give out names or addresses of RT students. A lot of times we pass this information around among us, but it must stay among us, okay? It cannot go, we agree to maintain these children's privacy, okay? So we can't give out names, addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, anything to anybody else. Should the media come to your location, what do? You We do not allow the media to come into the school unless it's approved by Laura or myself, okay? And again, it's just to maintain control of what goes out there into the public as we go forward. Any photographs should be approved by the executive director. A parent comes and says, I need to, my student has a dentist appointment and I need to pick them up from release time. What do? They have to check them out from the school. They cannot pick up a child at release time. You can take them back to the school at that point in time. You can tell the parent, I had one come up, but she had something signed by the principal. She came to the school, said, I've already been to the principal. Here's the note that she sent, okay? But they have to sign out with the school. We bring X number of students to the release time program. We better bring X number of students back, okay? No X minus 1 going there. My wife's an algebra teacher. You may not give permission to someone else who comes in, who may be visiting the program, to address the students. You address the students. We do allow visitors. We want potential volunteers to come. I can tell you about an incident where we had a mother show up, and she moved into the classroom and took over. She started teaching the lesson. Well, we can't do that, okay? Who knows where that might go, okay? And other people will come that want to address, want to do handouts, want to do other things. We have to maintain our curriculum, as Gussie said. We have to stay within certain parameters as we go forward. Turn the page again. And I hope you read all this in detail. At the top of that page it says our curriculum cannot be shared with other people. People come to us and say, well, I'd like to use your curriculum. If they do that, get with Laura, get with me, get with a member of the board, and we'll handle that. Media inquiries, permission of the chairman of the board has to be before we allow the media into the school. We love media, but we want to make sure we're doing it under controlled circumstances. What happens if one of the volunteers violates the policy in some way, shape, or form? They fail in some way to maintain our expectations of volunteers, and you lead the policy for administrative action, and there's several steps we go through there, and I just invite you to read all that. At the bottom of that page it says, do not give email, phone, or mailing addresses to others who are not involved in CLCA, and that's just a repeat of what I said before. We have to keep it within the group. One of the most important is on page 7, walking transport guidelines. This is when we have problems with students, some of the most serious problems occur in transport. Somehow when children leave the building, it's time to run and play. Okay? We want them to walk in a nice orderly fashion from one building to another, and it never happens that way, right? So we have to have guidelines on transporting children. There are a lot of hints in there. If you can divide them into smaller groups, the more adult supervision we can have, and I will tell you in almost every school we can use more people in transport. The people who are in transport, we have people who I see walking along with the students, maybe talking with the students, and behind them chaos is happening. That's not what you're there for if you're involved in transport. We are there to keep these children safe and have them safely transported. If there's horseplay and there's others running around going on, you need to stop them and take care of it right then and there. If you're in front, keep checking behind you. If you're at the rear and you see chaos going on in front of you, stop them. Stop them right there. We're not going to proceed until this chaos is taken care of. We are developing some new guidelines to help us, and David, come on up here. David presented to the board some additional guidelines that he has developed. He uses here at Copeland, and I'd like David to present those to you now. I think you all know Dr. David Miller. He's been with our program for a long, long time.
Thank you. What I'm going to say is mainly about transport. Like Dave said, when the kids get out of the building, and I was raised on a farm, and when the hogs and cattle got out in the open field, they were harder to control than when they were in the barn. So it's much like that. So when we go in you, my. So here at Copeland, because we cross a busy road, we use a rope, and that helps us with the control also. Kids have to stay on the rope. So as we transport, as we walk, the various transporters will admonish the kids about stay on the rope, don't jump around, don't holler, don't bother your neighbor. Now, after we admonish a couple of times, then we call the student to us. And they walk with us. You know, kids don't like to walk with an adult. They're growing up. They're young folks. They know a lot. When we call them to us, we only hold them by the wrist. Nothing else. We don't hold their hand. We don't put our hand on their shoulder. We don't drag them along. We hold them by the wrist, and that's all. And that works pretty well. As we walk along, I'll ask them, what are the rules of transport? And they have a pretty decent idea of what they're supposed to be doing. And then we might talk about the reason for rules. And then we might go on and talk about some of the memory verses that they've learned and what God thinks about all this. And that generally takes care of it, and you walk to the building, the church or the school, and everything is fine. Now, on occasion, rare occasions, and this generally happens with some of the boys that we deal with, they might resist. They might start to squirm a little bit. So I just stop. Okay, now you're with me for a reason. You misbehaved. You're with me. Now, if you can handle that and accept the consequences of me holding your wrist and us walking to the school, that will be fine. That's your choice. But if you persist in squirming and resisting, then I will call your parents very shortly. Now, that generally takes care of that problem. Now, in this time and day, we have to be ready for everything. Kids know a lot of the games. If a child would ever say, "You're hurting me," we would stop immediately, get the coordinator or another volunteer to come and, look at whatever the hurt area is, check it out, look for any redness, bruising, etc. Unfortunately, that is our time, and we have to be prepared for everything. So that's rare, but that's the way we would deal with it. Okay. Any questions?
What do you do with a child who enjoys being singled out?
Okay. What do you do with a child that enjoys being singled out, wants to walk with a volunteer? Good question. Now they're going to want to tell you about what's going on in their lives, and if we've got enough volunteers, I frequently have one on each hand, but I would just, we've got enough volunteers that we can probably handle that, and they can, that.
Sorry. I'd like to address that if I could.
Sure.
One occasion I had a young lady, she had a lot of issues, and there were a lot of issues in transport. Other kids picking on her, and she was picking on a lot of other kids. And what happened was I became her special walking buddy. And she got the attention she wanted, but everything was under control. And so we talked and we walked, and we had enough people that everything was under control, so I became her special walking buddy, and we had a good walk every day.
I'll be working with the Tutton Middle School.
Okay.
They're at an age where they can get quite physical. So you try to hold their wrist, there could be red marks set around their arm.
Okay, if there would be, that's because there's been resistance, and they squirmed or they would resist a little bit. The other thing I didn't say is anytime we do this, which isn't frequent, always tell the coordinator that you've done this. And again, if there's any squirming or resistance, we stop. If this is going to persist, then I will be calling your parents immediately, and that generally puts all of that to an end.
Can I have it again, David?
Yeah.
The other thing, and we're gonna write this up more formally, and you'll get an addendum to the policy because we've been talking about this a lot lately. If a child says that they've been injured, whether there's any sign of injury or not, if they tell you, "You've hurt me," or any other injury, if they've tripped and fall and they skinned their knee or whatever, the parents will be called. If there's any allegation of harm to that child in any way, shape, or form, make all coordinators get with the coordinator and make sure that the parent is called and knows the circumstances.
Frank?
You talked about holding hands. Some of the kids want to hold your hand.
Okay.
Is that okay?
No. Can you hold their hand? We do not do this. We only do this.
Third grader comes up to you and grabs your hand. What do you
Then just take their wrist. It's just a better way to do it, and only doing the wrist just satisfies a lot of requirements.
What about the ones that say you can't touch them?
Oh. The child, again, the kids know all the games these days. The question was, what if they say, "Don't touch me"? You can't touch me. I guess. Oh,
I have an answer for that.
great.
I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. That's
Okay.
my general answer. Is that
Okay.
They're often walking along the side of the road. And
Mhm.
if there's horseplay going on, I will grab an elbow because they're getting close to the curb.
Right.
I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe. And when they say, you're not supposed to touch me, I'll say, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. And that ends it usually.
Right. And
One of the reasons that we want to get this written up into policy so that you have the backup to say, this is release times policy. If you will not behave, then we lead you by the wrist. If you don't squirm and try to pull away, then you're not going to be hurt, right? And you know that you're supposed to behave, and you know these things are going to happen. And we are going to call your parents to let them know that this is what's going on. And hopefully that diffuses it. The child who says, I won't. A lot of times, there was a boy this past year who told me, I'm going to go home and tell my mother, and she's going to, she's going to take me out of this program. Called Mama, and Mama said, no way, young man. I mean, that doesn't always happen. A lot of times parents defend the kid. But in this case, the parent said, you are going to behave, okay? And you're going to do what these people tell you to do. So, and he, you know what? He was fine the whole rest of the year. We had no more of that.
the other thing is, a lot of you have grandchildren, or you can remember how you dealt with your kids. And, kids will be kids, and they'll try a lot of stuff. So it's not like this is the only place that happens. Other questions?
Any issue about taking them, just saying, if you're not going to behave, that's it. They just walk them right back to the room, classroom. Because I've had teachers, the classroom teachers, who have said, so-and-so is not coming today because they cannot behave. And I'm kind of like,
Mhm.
okay. But then again, if we have a problem, if they're walking over and they're misbehaving, can we take them back?
We can, sure.
The question was, if a child's misbehaving in transport, can you take them right back to the classroom? It's an ongoing thing. I don't recommend that. And one of the reasons is we don't want to make our problems the school's problems. Okay, we need to handle problems ourselves if we can. We don't want to, every time a student misbehaves, we don't want to be going to the principal and saying, little Joey didn't do what we told him. We want to call the parents and get the parents involved if we can. If it gets to the point where we've gone through this and we can't do it, then the real answer is go back to the principal and say, little Joey is no longer welcome at RT. And we've had to do that on occasion. I hate it when we have to do that because, quite frankly, little Joey is one of the people who really needs RT. And that should be done through the coordinator. The contact with the school should be through the coordinator or Laura. If individual volunteers are running back to the school doing this and that, then we've kind of lost control of the situation. So get with the coordinator, let the coordinator handle it from there.
If the teacher says so-and-so is not coming today because they're using, that is punishment for that child, they can't come because they were acting out in their classroom. Do we just leave them?
Yeah, we don't have a choice. We have to. If the teacher says they're not coming, then they're not coming. If the child says I'm not coming, then that's a different situation.
We didn't know it. Another child took the money, and then she blamed us for taking it. Anyway, the student that took the money brought it to her. But what is the best way of handling that?
We know there are things that are potential problems. Money would be one of them. The little whatever those spinners are these days. If you, what do you call them? Fidget spinners. Yeah, I got to get the lingo, don't I? Anyway, anything that we see like that's a potential problem. If I'll frequently say, if I see that again, it's going to be in my pocket. And that would be the case with money, spinners, or anything else that could be a potential problem. And then we return it when we get back to school. You'll get it back, but at the school.
We pray and we act. If you will turn to page 10, policy page 10, there are some good hints there on talking to the child student. Questions like, what did you do wrong? Talking to them about scriptures that they've learned and what that scripture might mean and how it might reflect in the way that they act. Ask them how they think their behavior affects the other students. What about respect for their teacher? Is that an issue as they go forward? Or respect for the transport worker? Do you believe in God? And if so, do you believe that the way you're acting honors God? These are questions that and you need to get them, you don't lecture them, you get them to respond to these questions, to answer these questions for you. And basically what you do is you get them to acknowledge their own guilt, and hopefully out of that you get a chance to have them commit to good behavior. On the next page, on page 11, are the policies regarding physical contact. David is recommending you grab them by the wrist. But there are other areas on there. You never touch a student. It says anywhere that it would be covered by a bathing suit. I would tell you by a very modest bathing suit, okay? In this day and age, I'm not sure that covers it anymore, but never, and of course the overriding principle is never be alone with a student. You might be alone, but be in an area that's visible to a bunch of others. Okay, you may be escorting a child to the bathroom, or you may be talking to them about a discipline problem, but be in an area where you can be seen if you need to be alone with a student. And touching can be a very touchy issue. How's that? As we go forward. So hugs, I had to remind people at the closing ceremony, you can't ask them to hug you. If they come up and say, I want a hug, absolutely, do a side hug. Love hugs. All of us love hugs, but you can initiate the hug. Okay? Everybody understand? And then the last couple of things I want to talk to you about is, if you suspect abuse or neglect in any way, shape, or form, whether part of RT or that came that way, it needs to be reported. Reported to the coordinator. It needs to be written up, and it will go back to the school. The guidelines are there. Please follow them.